Hello, everyone. I've always had an interest in company histories. When I was at Northern Electric, I wrote and had published a short illustrated guide to the history of the company and its predecessors, both the nationalized industry, the Northeastern Electricity Board, and before that, the pioneering Newcastle Electric Supply Company, NESCO. And I recently led on a project to document the story of the Rowntree's, later Nestle factory that was set up in Fordon, Newcastle in 1958, but which sadly closed at the end of 2023. The outcome was a book and an exhibition at the City Library. For its first 35 years, Rowntree's was very much a family company, but by the end of the 19th century, the company needed external funding for its expansion and became a public limited liability company with many shareholders, Rowntree's & Co. Down the years, I've been disappointed at how few of our major, many of them famous, regional companies have had their stories captured and published. Maybe some of them think that their stories are too dull, metal bashers or bus operators. But when you think about it, they're really stories about the entrepreneurs who created them, often very interesting biography if you can tease it out. And the stories about how they grew and survived in the face of competition and of great events like war or the pandemic aren't quite adventure stories, but can be very interesting indeed. This issue of, let's call it, relative corporate anonymity it came home to me about 20 years ago. I was a Newcastle city councillor, and we decided to give the freedom of the city to Rowntree's on the occasion of their centenary. I was deputy leader at the time, and because my late mother had been a tea packer at Ringtons pre-war, I asked if I might give the speech of nomination. I visited the company head office in Heaton and met the managing director. I asked if there was a publication about the history of this distinguished company that I could read for my speech, or if not, was one planned as part of the centenary celebrations? And the answer was no on both counts, which did surprise me. So sometime later, after I'd finished work and also finished as a councillor and had embarked upon giving presentations like this, I thought it might be a good idea to focus on this theme of local companies. And inspired by the Ringtons story, I thought that narrowing the field a little to concentrate on family-run companies might be appropriate. The idea was on the back burner for a while, as I wasn't sure that a presentation just about Ringtons would be of wide enough interest. Then I saw a 30-minute television program about Barbour, based in South Shields, and then unexpectedly I was given a Christmas present of a very nice book about Fenwick, or Fenwicks, as we tend to say. So the idea turned into one where I might talk a little about family companies generally, and then focus on three of our finest from the region, all with national reputations and in some cases beyond. Well, you might think it obvious and self-evident, but just to start with the definition of a family business, drawing here from the UK Institute of Family Business, the IFB, and the Europe-wide Family Business Network, FBM. A family business is a commercial organization in which decision-making is influenced by multiple generations of a family, related by blood or marriage or adoption, who have both the ability to influence the vision and direction of the business that they've established and the willingness to use this ability to drive the business forward. So they're closely identified with the firm through ownership or leadership or both. Owner-manager entrepreneurial firms, which are of course very common, are not considered to be family businesses unless they have this multi-generational dimension and family influence that reflect the unique dynamics and relationships of family businesses. In one sense, the family business is the oldest and most common model of economic organization. The vast majority of businesses throughout the world, from corner shops to multinational publicly listed companies with hundreds of thousands of employees, could be considered family businesses. Some of the world's largest family-run businesses are Walmart in the US, Volkswagen Group in Germany, Korea's Samsung Group, and Tata Group in India. The economic prevalence and importance of this kind of business are often underestimated. Throughout the 20th century, or most of it, academics and economists were intrigued by a newer, allegedly improved business model. Large publicly traded companies run in an apparently rational, bureaucratic manner by well-trained organization men. It's fair to say that privately owned or family-controlled enterprises are not always easy to study. In many cases, they aren't subject to financial reporting requirements, and little information is made public about financial performance. Ownership can be distributed through trusts or holding companies. Nonetheless, they're a very significant source of wealth creation and employment. So a firm is said to be family-owned if the family members are the controlling shareholder, that is a person rather than a state or corporation or management trust or a mutual fund, with enough shares to assure a majority or at least very significant voting rights. Well, there's something called the Global Family Business Index, comprising the largest 500 family firms around the world. In this index, for a privately held firm, a company is classified as a family business where a family controls more than 50% of the voting rights. For a publicly listed firm, a family is classified as a family firm where the family holds at least 32% of the voting rights. So in a family business, like here, typically 2 or more members within the management team or the board are drawn from the owning family. They can have owners who are not family members. However, family members are still involved materially in the operations of their family business in some capacity. And in smaller companies, usually 1 or more family members are the senior officers and managers. Family businesses generate more than 50% of America's GDP, less than the UK, where a lot of family-created businesses seem content to bail out and float on the stock exchange, so often giving up control. And it's one of the reasons quoted for Britain's underperformance economically, that instead of being in the business for the long term, the shareholders and the directors who serve them are mainly interested in short-term profitability, driving up the share price and taking their cuts in salaries and bonuses as quickly and as regularly as they can. On the other hand, owners of family businesses who stay the course typically take a long-term view, and their operational style favors steady, sustainable growth rather than pursuing short-term profits. This gives many of them the ability to steady the ship more easily during times of economic upheaval. Well, in Germany, where the government goes out of the way to celebrate and encourage family businesses, 90% of all businesses are family-owned or run, and the dynamism of the economy over a very long time has come from the Mittelstand, the medium-sized and smaller businesses that make business decisions with an eye to the long term, with a focus on reinvesting profits and a real commitment to their employees through training and some share in decision-making. So family businesses are a little like people. They come in all shapes and sizes. They can be run by mothers and sons, fathers and daughters, or between siblings, as we'll see with Ringtons. Family participation as managers and owners of a business can strengthen the company because family members are often especially loyal and dedicated to the enterprise. However, family participation as managers and or owners can present unique problems because the dynamics of the family system and the dynamics of the business systems are not often in balance. A lot of family-run businesses say that even when they think the business needs additional external funding, they don't actively seek it. They quote additional risk, potential cost, loss of control, and the time burden of applying for finance among the reasons, although also the thought that they might be rejected by lenders because they're family businesses. because of some kind of cultural prejudice against family businesses as less than professional concerns. It's worth acknowledging that there are issues that are particular to family businesses. Of course, physical, emotional, and financial problems among family members can greatly impact the day-to-day operation of the business. If you watched Succession on television, Brian Cox as Logan and his children fighting it out over control, influence, and who takes over. Well, they ran a huge media empire, so it's thought to have been based on Rupert Murdoch and family. Just some other difficult issues to mention. For some businesses, having a laid-back culture can be a positive. However, the informal structure and culture found in many family businesses can equate to a lack of documentation, policies, and defined strategy and goals. It can be difficult to resist the pressure that comes with requests from family members who want to join the business. And this becomes especially complicated if they lack the business skills and experiences needed for the position. Owners of family businesses may have varying opinions on the value of their business, or even worse, they may have no understanding about the value of their business and what things contribute to or detract from that value. Further complicating this matter is determining how to split the profits of the business, including among the owner's stakes. While family members may not always have the same opinions, they often have similar upbringing and life experiences, which can lead to a uniform view of the business. Businesses, I think, do need to have external views of their company and their competition in order to thrive. It's important for family businesses to plan ahead for business succession. Many family-owned businesses don't have a plan in place, and this can be a source of heated debate and intense family politics when the time arises to select new leadership. And often there's no exit plan. Family businesses often lack a defined strategy for what will happen if an owner, or all of them, want to retire, sell the business, or transfer responsibility. This goes hand in hand with succession plan issues. All businesses need a plan for the future. Well, thankfully, the 3 family-run companies that I'm going to talk about now haven't experienced these problems, or if they have, then they've found ways to overcome them. I'll start with Ringtons because their story encompasses many of these issues typical of family businesses. While there was a Mr. Barbour and a Mr. Fenwick, there was never a Mr. Rington. The story actually begins in Leeds with a man called Samuel Smith. He was born there in 1872 and began working as a butcher's boy. At the age of 10, he began working a few hours a week as an errand boy for a Leeds-based tea company called Ridgway's. He eventually took up a position as a salesman for the company, where he stayed for 25 years and became a manager. At the turn of the century, whilst working in the Sheffield area, he first saw door-to-door tea delivery systems, a new distribution system that he immediately realized had potential, and it set him off wanting to establish his own door-to-door business. Because of restrictions in his employment contract, he was prevented from doing this in the Leeds area. So he and his family decided to move north to Newcastle with his wife Ada and 6 children, all under 9. His wife had family connections on Tyneside. So on the 17th of June, 1907, along with business partner William Titterington, Sam formed Ringtons. Titterington had money and put up the initial capital to buy a horse and a van and stock of tea, and they rented a lock-up shop in 3rd Avenue, Eton. The company took the name Ringtons, Rington from Titterington, who would put in most of the money, and the S from Smith. Well, Smiths wouldn't have been much of a name, I guess, or Smitterington, for example. Their business idea took off fairly quickly, and in a year, the company had acquired 2 horse-drawn vans and taken on assistants, including a Robert Sturdy, who had worked with Sam in Leeds. Next year, they relocated to an abandoned rifle range on Sheets Road. The reliability and friendliness of the sales team helped build up many hundreds of loyal customers. Sam's son Douglas joined the company in 1912, beginning as a van boy, but beginning the tradition of a truly family-run business. By 1914, Samuel had bought out William Titterington. Ringtons had built a reputation for quality and had grown to 11 horse-drawn vans. But the outbreak of World War I took away 15 of Sam's key staff. He promised to help provide for their families as best as possible and keep their jobs open for when they returned. But it wasn't easy for the company during wartime with rationing and quite restrictive sales laws. It became a desperate effort for survival. Sam was reduced to selling anything edible from dried eggs and tinned milk and canned meat just to keep the business alive. When the war ended, Sam was left with just 3 vans on the road and the business on the verge of collapse, but he remained true to his word and re-employed the 12 staff members who had survived the conflict. This strong sense of loyalty ran right through the company, and they turned the business around. As soon as rationing ended, people flocked to buy the quality tea that they had been denied during the war years. The post-war growth was phenomenal, and saw a total of 48 depots opened up across the northeast and hundreds of additional staff recruited. Sam built a 6-story head office on Algernon Road in Byker and a new factory there. He decided to broaden out and set up several associated businesses. One called Cut Out Cartons, which was a packaging business, and another, Northern Coach Builders, which built both for horse-drawn vans and motorized vehicles for the tea business, but for other customers too. During World War II, Northern Coach Builders employed over 1,300 people in 5 factories, making vehicles and aircraft wings, and after the war, buses and trolleybuses. Smith's Electrical Vehicles was another subsidiary that developed from the company's interest in multi-purpose electrical motor vehicles. Well, during this time, Ringtons became one of the first companies in the country to introduce premium offers, starting with a piece of mailing pottery, the willow leaf tea caddy, with many more to follow. The appeal of these ceramics is still very strong today, and some originals are very collectible items. A big achievement for Sam was to build a large blending and packing factory in Leeds on the site of the very cottage that he'd been born. By the mid-30s, son Douglas had gained many years of experience in the tea trade, traveling throughout India and Ceylon to learn about tea firsthand, so he was being groomed to take a leading role. Over 400 of Rington's staff were called up for World War II, including Sam Smith's grandsons before they'd even joined the company. A government order compelled Ringtons to take its fleet of 200 vans off the road in the interests of the national economy. Sam took back all his workers again who came back from the war, in addition to keeping on the disabled workers he'd employed in their absence. Sam died in 1949, leaving the company shares divided between sons Douglas, who had 6/11 majority, and Malcolm the balance. But heavy death duties and a very large backdated tax bill required the sale of some of the company's subsidiaries. Conflict arose as Malcolm worked in the businesses that had to be sold. Douglas initially refused to let Malcolm come into the businesses that remained, then allowed him to have the Cut Out Carton subsidiary, but Malcolm then sold it, left the business altogether, and bought the Robin Hood pub on the Military Road. So Douglas was in charge and faced with re-equipping the company and diversifying its activities. But there were several other members of the family, including his 2 sons, employed in management positions. The last horse wasn't retired until the 1960s, but long before then, van deliveries had been pretty much fully mechanized, especially when grooms and blacksmiths became hard to find. The introduction of tea bags in 1964 was another big change and reflected new consumer lifestyles. Douglas built up a fleet of 250 vans, an extended network of depots. He died in 1972, and his son Johnny took over the main tea business, and brother Douglas Jr., the electrical vehicle business. Johnny's eldest son Nigel had joined the business in 1972 and became tea buying director after familiarizing with the tea and coffee plantations in India, Sri Lanka, and Kenya. In 1983, taking some of the pressure off running the company of his father, he became joint managing director, later chairman of the group, with brother Simon, now as chief executive, and younger brother Colin, director and head of tea production. This fourth generation of the Smith family has brought in many changes, including the introduction of innovative vacuum packing techniques and the construction of a custom-built factory in North Tyneside, though the head office remains in Algernon Road. Today, the company still delivers door-to-door to over 260,000 customers throughout the UK. It has 35 offices across the country, a turnover of over £60 million annually, more than 500 employees, and a growing international market. On the importance of succession planning, the directors signed a shareholder agreement, which included rules on how long the directors could remain within the firm as executives, a document which formed the foundation for the future of the family business. Julia, Nigel's daughter, was appointed as a non-executive director of the company in 2013 and is now chair of the board. And following a rigorous process, 3 other younger family members were selected as those lined up to potentially take on the top jobs. So how is the company doing? Well, of course, the pandemic knocked back sales heavily as the firm was forced to take its delivery vans off the road for the first time since World War II to protect its customers and staff. But the company stayed profitable throughout, even though revenues and profits did slip. The company increasingly imports and packs tea for a host of private customers, including major supermarkets, which helped, while also, of course, selling its own wide range of products in shops, online and through the fleet. The most recent published accounts are for year ended June 23. Turnover climbed 14% from 70 to 80 million, but profits dropped 39% to 2.7 million as business costs rose quickly. But in a report alongside the accounts, the directors said they were satisfied with the company's performance. They said retained profits continue to be invested in facility improvements and efficiency measures, together with additional tea and coffee packing capacity. And CEO Simon Smith said that the family's strategy, in which money is set aside for, we called it a rainy day, had put it in good stead for weathering challenges, including the pandemic and last year's cost increases, rising inflation, cost of living crisis, energy costs, and rising wages bill. He said it's been a tough period, but we traded well. Customer loyalty proves to be extremely strong. We are once again investing in all areas of the business. The Barbour story began in 1894 in Marketplace in South Shields. John Barbour, Scotsman from Galloway, started selling oilskins to protect the area's growing community of sailors, fishermen, and dockers. Today, the 5th generation family-owned business remains on Tyneside, with Barbour's headquarters and factory located in Tyneside, South Shields, and the company run today by Dame Margaret Barbour, as it has been for the past 50 years. Worn by everyone from fishermen to fashionistas, wax jackets are something of an iconic fashion item, part of the fabric of England. A team of highly skilled workers in South Shields hand make 650 waxed jackets a day. Although the company sources products from around the globe, some of Barbour's classic wax jackets are still manufactured and repaired by hand in the factory in Tyneside. And Barbour now has retail stores present in over 40 countries. Collections cater for men, women, children, now even dogs, broadening out from Barbour's country wear roots. Today, the heritage and lifestyle clothing brand produces clothing that's designed for a full lifestyle wardrobe. As well as jackets and coats, the Barbour wardrobe includes shirts, dresses, knitwear, footwear, and accessories. You could equally argue that its main product is the most middle-class jacket imaginable. It's hugely popular among the royal family. King Charles, Queen Camilla, Princess Royal, Princess of Wales are all fans, as was a young lady, Diana Spencer. For second homers with a country bolt-hole, Barbour is an integral part of their weekend look as a Labrador or a pair of hunter wellies. However, it may have 3 royal warrants and have been beloved by the Queen, but it's just as beloved by agricultural workers who value its protective qualities and by office workers who adopt it as a symbol of affluence. Some key dates in the company's progress. In 1908, second-generation director Malcolm Barbour produced the first mail-order catalogue. By 1917, the catalogue accounted for almost 75% of Barbour's business, including international orders from as far away as Chile, South Africa, and Hong Kong. An important person in the family story is third-generation owner Duncan Barbour, who grew the business significantly and, amongst other initiatives, introduced a motorcycling range, which quickly took off. And Barbour suits were worn by virtually every British international team from the mid-30s to 1977, when they pulled out of that particular market. When Duncan was called up in 1939, his brother Malcolm and Duncan's wife Nancy took over the running of the business. And during the war, they developed the Ursula suit, which became standard issue for everyone in the submarine service. After Duncan and Malcolm had died, Nancy took over the role of chairman in 1964, and her son John became managing director. But the big change came 8 years later. Well, taking charge of the business was far from Margaret Barbour's mind when she married into the family during the 1960s. She'd been working as a teacher, so was more familiar with classrooms than company boardrooms. After just 5 years of marriage, her husband, John Barbour, died suddenly. He left his Barbour shares to her, and she vowed to devote her considerable energies to the firm that had been his and his family's life. Margaret, now Dame Margaret, turned the company's rustic clothes, initially designed for seamen, river workers, motorcyclists, and Royal Navy submariners, into a fashion accessory for the 1980s Lone Rangers and the British upper-class country set. She then turned the Countryside brand also into an international urban fashion icon of the 40 countries where it's represented through the company's local offices and network of retailers and distributors. Dame Margaret's now 85, but still runs the company, helped by her daughter, Helen. Like jeans, Barbours are neither in or out of fashion, which gives designers a fairly free rein. We're a nation of outwear lovers, a trait born partly out of necessity, our climate dictates it, but partly out of preference too. It's been said that where Italians are excited by handbags, we Brits are excited by waterproof jackets. Nor can many companies who talk the talk of sustainability claim to be genuinely sustainable in the way that Barbour can. In 2021, the company celebrated a centenary of rewaxing, encouraging customers to extend the life of existing Barbours via its cleaning and repairing service. Prices for a rewax start at £35. Barbour's make, do, and mend ethos was a core message decades before sustainability became fashionable. Well, under Margaret Barbour, the company became a very important force for philanthropy in the area. In 1988, she set up the Barbour Foundation to benefit charities and good causes, primarily in the region, and support research into the causes of chronic illness. And today, over £26 million has been donated. During the pandemic, Barbour was very quick to offer to make PPE, personal protective equipment, clothing, for the NHS, 50,000 of them, the first batch of 1,500 going to the RVI. And Barbour is also a family business in the sense that many generations of employees from the same families have worked there, deliberately so. This loyalty to and from employees seems to me to be a particular feature of family businesses, alongside a commitment to the long-term health of the business. A quote from Dame Margaret brings these two themes together. We kept money in the business. We don't have yachts or Rolls-Royce cars. We use the profits for expansion, recruit good people, and treat them well. Published in January this year for the accounting year ending April 30th, 2024, Barbour reported a 15% increase in operating profit to just under 40 million on turnover of 322 million pounds, attributing the profit increase to cost reductions and favourable foreign exchange rates. The employee base increased from 1,132 to 1,175. Small increase, but growing. Performance outside the UK, Europe, and North America was the standout, up 22.5%. Europe turnover also increased, but UK sales fell. Despite the current uncertainty and market contraction, we believe in the sustainable long-term growth of our business, Barbour said in its accounts. We believe deeply that there are many exciting and accessible markets around the world. Once the clothing trade in the Northeast had many companies and employed tens of thousands, now it's pretty much just Barbour flying the flag in any meaningful way, but how very well they do it. And now Fenwick. Fenwick is the largest family-owned group of department stores in the United Kingdom. There are currently 8 stores, following the recent closure of the Bond Street store in London. When John James Fenwick opened his store in Newcastle in 1882, he did so with a commitment to luxury and a real eye for quality that has continued. Fenwick became known for providing the finest selection of luxury from around the world across fashion, beauty, and lifestyle, curated into quite sophisticated shopping spaces. Well, John James Fenwick, known as JJ, was born in Richmond, North Yorkshire in 1846. Early in his career, he learnt his trade as a shop assistant. In 1882, his ambition came to fruition when Fenwick bought and renovated a doctor's house for £181 and 4 shillings at number 5 Northumberland Street. This would become the start of his legacy. J.J. Fenwick, mantle maker and furrier. Together with 2 assistants, he sold what was an unparalleled range of mantles, silk goods, dresses, fabrics, and trimmings for the well-dressed women of Newcastle. JJ's keen eye for luxury and exceptional care of his clientele made the store especially popular. And soon he had expanded his space by purchasing 38, 37, 38, and 40 Northumberland Street. Today, the flagship Fenwick store still stands on this exact site, offering the same incomparable service, the finest products, and enjoying in-store experiences as founded by JJ over a year before. JJ's son Fred joined the business in 1890 and was sent to Paris to train in the art of retail. Here he embraced the revolutionary concept of department store, perfectly exemplified in the Bon Marché. When JJ and Fred introduced this setup to their Newcastle store, they started what would become a family-owned retail empire. In 1891, Fenwick opened at New Bond Street in London's most luxurious shopping district. The first fashion store on the street, Fenwick quickly became a must-visit for affluent, stylish women eager to see the latest styles. In 1902, Fenwick hosted its first ever Christmas bazaar, welcoming customers to explore and browse in-store at their leisure with no obligation to buy, anticipating a forthcoming trend, more relaxed and recreational retail. And in 1913, Fenwick unveiled its new neoclassical frontage for the store, that wonderful facade that we know so well. The interior of the store was lavish too, making shopping quite an experience. And here are some interior shots. In 1935, typically forward-looking, Fenwick became the first establishment in the UK to advertise on public transport and to use rich illustrations in its advertisements. At this point, I'll just show some of the classy fashion advertising that the company became renowned for. Just continuing the company chronology, looking to grow the business, John Fenwick, with brothers Christopher and Peter, acquired the Joseph Johnson store in Leicester. And we are a notable and popular development in 1971, as a new tradition has begun. Fenwick, Newcastle's first animated Christmas window display. The now yearly lavish and imaginative Christmas installations have since attracted huge numbers of visitors and are a highlight of the city's seasonal events calendar. The very first theme was Camberwick Green, bringing to life a favorite children's television show at the time. Underneath it, on the image, a more recent window, the 2019 Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And here, the most recent of all, last Christmas, the 12 Days of Christmas. Still growing their property portfolio, in 1976 at the new Brent Cross Shopping Centre, Fenwick opened what was the centre's flagship store, and in the next decade opened department stores in York and Canterbury. Then in 2001, under the chairmanship of Mark Fenwick, great-grandson of the founder, having acquired the Bentles Group, they added stores in Bracknell and Kingston-on-Thames. In 2022, Fenwick enjoyed a year of celebrations to mark 140 illustrious years. However, it must be said that the last members of the Fenwick family working within the organization have now left the board, heralding change and new governance, even though the family retain majority ownership. And Fenwick had to cope with a very tough time for the retail sector in general, including business rate revaluations discounts available in rival stores, the need to add to its pension fund, rise in online shopping, of course, and the increase in the minimum wage, and also the pandemic, with the stores closed for many months. The company closed its loss-making store in Leicester and was also forced to close its Windsor store after failing to find an alternative location when the lease expired. However, a 35 million redevelopment in Colchester led to the opening of a new store, the largest department redevelopment outside of London. And Fenwick opened its new store in Bracknell in 2017. However, unfortunately, Fenwick has now closed its London store, selling the building to property developers in a 430 million deal. Despite its location, it was the fourth smallest in the portfolio and took only half as much in sales as the Northumberland Street store here in Newcastle. The company says it's using the proceeds of the deal to improve its online presence and bankroll significant investments in Fenwick stores, including in Newcastle, still the flagship store, where a £40 million 5-phase revamp is underway, beginning with a new atrium and also including new store entrances, complete renovation of the beauty hall, plus new restaurants. Fenwick and Barbour teamed up on a pop-up cafe last autumn. Fenwick and Barbour have previously collaborated to create an outdoor wear collection in celebration of Fenwick's 140 years of history in 2022. Well, last October, Fenwick reported an operating loss of 38 million before tax in their last financial year, a seventh successive year of losses. But at least it was only half the loss of the previous year. Gross sales were down 6% to 299 million. Like many other companies, Fenwick faced these big challenges from online retailers and a very volatile retail environment caused by higher energy and commodity costs and rising interest rates. Well, despite several years of losses, the company does have a strong balance sheet because it owns all its own stores, so the future looks a little bright. So there we have it, the stories of three renowned local family businesses. There are other great stories to tell. Here are some other Northeast family-based companies that have grown, prospered. Then we have the companies of distinction that were family-owned, like Greggs, set up by John Gregg as a Tyneside bakery in 1939, its first shop in 1951, growing steadily, organically, and by acquisition of other bakeries until they listed on the stock exchange in 1984 and ownership moved on. Or the giant transport operator Arriva, formerly Cowies of Sunderland. Tom Cowie and his family began by repairing and selling cycles in Matemba Terrace in Sunderland. So thank you very much for tuning in to the fascinating stories of our homegrown family businesses.